The British Parliament votes today on whether or not to leave the EU without a deal. That vote coming one day after MPs reject Theresa May's Brexit agreement for a second time. The Pope's former finance minister sentenced to 6 years in prison. Cardinal George Pell found guilty of molesting 2 choir boys in Australia, the most senior Catholic to be convicted of child sex abuse. And as protests continue in Algeria demanding the president resign, we'll look at how 2 Algerian students here in France are reacting to his promise to not run for re-election while postponing the next vote at the same time. Thanks for joining us here on France 24. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeannie Godula in Paris. Well, we'll start first in London, where it was another slap in the face for the Prime Minister, Theresa May, last night. British MPs again rejected her Brexit deal, despite new assurances from the European Union on the Northern Irish backstop. Parliament is voting again tonight on whether or not it wants to exit the EU without a deal at all. Peter O'Brien reports.
A second vote in Parliament and a second rejection.
The noes have it.
But leaders across Europe have already said Theresa May's amended deal was the best and final offer the UK could expect.
In politics, sometimes you get a second chance. It is what we do with this second chance that counts, because there will be no third chance. There will be no further interpretation of the interpretations and no further assurances on the reassurances.
So what's next? On Wednesday, MPs are set to vote on whether the UK should leave the EU without a deal. This is unlikely to pass, as in January Parliament agreed on a non-binding amendment which ruled it out, but the idea is still backed by several pro-Brexit politicians. If Parliament agrees not to leave without a deal, the government will bring forward a motion on Thursday on whether it wants to postpone the departure date. If this fails, the UK could still end up without a deal on March the 29th. If it passes, however, Theresa May will need to request an extension from the EU, who would likely make this decision at a summit starting on March the 21st. If EU members don't agree, the UK would yet again be facing a no-deal Brexit, on the brink of the deadline.
The main sticking point in the Brexit negotiations, of course, is the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Some fear the return of violence between the two sides or worry that a physical border could impact the economy. France 24's Clovis Casali reports now from the highly sensitive frontier at the heart of Brexit.
Joe Parker crosses the border several times a day. He doesn't really have a choice.
Well, what you're seeing here is my farm in Southern Ireland. And when you look there, straight across the water, there's a misty day today, you mightn't be able to see too well. Just in the other side of the water is my farm in Northern Ireland.
Joe regrets not voting in the Brexit referendum as he fears his life will soon change. He's envisaging selling his land in the south if a physical border is set up with all its administrative burdens. John Sheridan also lives at the border. He experienced decades of sectarian violence, border checks and humiliations.
Times would be touchy enough with customs and say, well, I want the whole van cleared out. They could just ask you here at the customs office to just clear the whole stuff onto the road. And then they'd leave you sitting on the road and you'd have to put the whole stuff back in yourself. Crazy.
As we cross this old stone bridge, we leave the Republic of Ireland and enter Northern Ireland. With its British post office, national lottery signs and money exchanges, Belcoo looks like any typical UK town. For decades, troops were stationed here and the barracks were attacked several times by Irish nationalists.
When the customs posts left and the barracks came down, everybody had a sense of freedom which they had never, some of them never before in their lifetime. And we see Brexit just as something which will ruin our peace and has the potential to ruin our economy as well. And we don't want one bit of it.
54% of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain in the European Union. And the question of the border has been at the heart of negotiations between London and EU member states. Europe played a part in the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, and like all parties involved, wants to avoid a hard border both in the name of peace and to protect the single market.
The most senior Catholic priest ever convicted of child sex abuse has been sentenced to 6 years in prison. Cardinal George Pell was found guilty of molesting 2 choir boys in a cathedral in Australia more than 20 years ago. Owen Barnell has the details.
Jail time and a registered sex offender for life. The sentence for the man who is once number 3 at the Vatican, Cardinal George Pell.
Cardinal Pell, would you please stand? I sentence you to a total effective sentence of 6 years imprisonment. I set a non-parole period of 3 years and 8 months.
Cardinal Pell was convicted last month on 5 charges of child sexual assault in the 1990s. One of the 5, sexual penetration of a minor. Each charge carried a maximum penalty of 10 years imprisonment. The judge rejected Pell's legal team's defence that if the offending had occurred, it meant the Cardinal had experienced a moment of irrationality. Protesters picketed Melbourne's County Court on Wednesday. During the celebrations after the sentence, a statement was read out on behalf of one of the survivors.
I respect what the judge said. It was meticulous and it was considered. It is hard for me to allow myself to feel the gravity of this moment.
The sexual abuse scandal gripping the Catholic Church is seeing cardinals around the world land in the dock. Yet Pell is the biggest scalp yet. The cardinal once managed the Vatican's finances and was one of the Pope's closest confidants. Pell has lodged an appeal. It will be heard in June.
And despite that incredible fall from grace for the former number 3 at the Vatican, many people feel the sentence against Cardinal Pell just isn't enough.
Oh, it was bittersweet. I was disappointed. I thought a head sentence of 8 to 9 years would have been appropriate. It's about the damage to the victim. It's not about the rehabilitation prospects of the pedophile. You know, there's a price to be paid.
No sentence is really long enough for taking the innocence of a child, but under current laws, I think it reflected a stronger message, you know, that these things can't be tolerated anymore.
Let's take a look now at some other news stories for you from around the world. Protests are continuing in Algeria, with demonstrators now calling for the president, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, to resign. Earlier this week, the president gave up his bid for a 5th term in office, but he also postponed next month's election without setting a new date. Many critics say that's just an attempt for the president to cling on to power. Our teams found out more from 2 young Algerian activists here in France.
Bushra, what do you think about the situation in Algeria?
You think you've won, but not really. We're going to have to wait another year.
We haven't won. We haven't won. It's more like extra time.
Bushra and Nabila are Algerian students living in France. They meet in a Parisian cafe the day after Abdelaziz Bouteflika pulled out of the presidential race.
They are cleaning the streets after the protests. And that shows the spirit of Algerians, which has been tarnished for years.
Bushra was born in 1997. She joined the UCP, the Union for Change and Progress Party, only a month and a half ago.
My whole life I have lived under the regime of Bouteflika, and we want change. The youth wants change. Now is the time to act and not stay hidden and use social media. We must act. We have hope that we can win this battle. Now is the time to do it.
Nabila, a former English teacher, is studying for a bachelor degree in communications. She is campaigning for her party, Nida El Watan, the voice of the country for the past 4 years.
It's not over. Now we'll mobilize to kick out the whole government. There are no more taboos between men and women. We're in this together. In the past, in particular, you wouldn't see veiled women gathering with men. Now that's finished. Men protest with their wives and children, and they demonstrate as a family. That's to show their solidarity, that families are unhappy, that democracy is present within the household, and that is very important to us.
Both women are planning to join the protests scheduled in Paris on Saturday and Sunday to keep pressure on the Algerian government.
Next now to the U.S., where TV stars Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin are among 50 people charged in a college admissions scandal. The actresses and dozens of other parents are accused of bribing coaches and other administrators in order to get their kids into top-level schools in the U.S. Solange Mougin reports.
It's a scandal worthy of the TV show she used to star on. Emmy-winning actress Felicity Huffman, who's known for her role on Desperate Housewives, was arrested Tuesday for conspiracy to commit fraud. She's just one of dozens of wealthy parents, including fellow actress Lori Loughlin, who've been charged with allegedly paying bribes to get their children into elite U.S. universities.
Make no mistake, this is not a case where parents were acting in the best interests of their children. This is a case where they flaunted their wealth, sparing no expense, to cheat the system so they could set their children up for success with the best education money could buy, literally.
At the heart of the scandal is an admissions consultant, William Rick Singer. He and his associates have pleaded guilty to setting up a system where, for example, students were recruited as top-tier athletes but had in fact never played the sport, or hiring imposters to sit for a student's entrance exams. Schemes that amounted to some $25 million in bribes over the past 8 years. For some in the cutthroat world of college admissions, wealthy parents going to great and even illegal means to get their children into select schools is not a surprise. It's part of the system.
You know, we're a capitalist country, and the admissions process is a part of our capitalist mentality, which is that this is a commodity that can and should be bought. And so parents of means have always tried to use whatever was in their capacity to game that system.
In court, no students or colleges were charged. But the 33 parents and around a dozen sports coaches will now have to answer to the U.S. justice system. Several risk up to 20 years in jail.
In Brazil, police say they have arrested 2 men in connection to the murder of local politician Marielle Franco. Since then, rights groups have accused authorities of dragging their heels in the investigation into her death, with some saying it's politically motivated. Franco was a staunch defender of LGBT rights and fought to help vulnerable communities in her home state of Rio. France 24's Olivia Salazar-Winspear has more.
Hers was the face of this year's winning samba school parade at the Rio Carnival. Marielle Franco was there in spirit, on flags, in their chants, as they called for justice to be done 1 year after her murder. Now, Brazilian police say they've arrested 2 men in connection with the death of the city councillor and her driver. They were shot in a drive-by attack in downtown Rio de Janeiro.
We're giving an important response to society. The explanation of a barbaric crime committed against a member of parliament, a woman who was carrying out her democratic duty.
One of the suspects is a retired member of the military police who lives in the same apartment building as President Jair Bolsonaro. The other, a policeman who was expelled from the force. A rising star in the left-wing Socialism and Liberty Party, Franco was known for her staunch defense of LGBT and women's rights and had denounced police violence in the state of Rio. Her murder last year sparked national protests, with many calling it a political assassination, saying she was targeted for being black, a lesbian and a defender of the poor.
The only method they could find to shut my sister up was to kill her. It was a cowardly crime, a well-executed crime, and I think no one, not even them, expected it to have these repercussions.
Demonstrations have been planned across Brazil for Thursday, the anniversary of Marielle Franco's death.
We'll wrap up now with this. We have the very latest for you now on the refugee footballer who was detained in Thailand last year and threatened with extradition to his home country of Bahrain. His name is Hakim Al Arabi, and he has just been made a citizen of Australia, where he plays semi-professional football. The 25-year-old player shot to international fame when he was arrested while on honeymoon in Thailand last year. He was wanted by Bahrain on offences linked to the 2011 Arab Spring uprisings. Stay with us here on France 24. I'll be back in about 15 minutes with more headlines.